What's up, guys? Welcome to another edition of Man Talk. Thanks for joining us. If you're with us for the first time, Man Talk is exactly what it sounds like.
We're just dudes talking, man.
Dudes talking.
Yeah,
real
that'd be dude talk, I guess.
Dude talk. We're man. I'm a man.
Yeah.
Man talk.
Man talking to a dude, yeah.
Which one's which?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Let's just keep going.
Well, we always say we talk about real, relevant, and gritty topics that a lot of times get set to the side. Doesn't get more real, relevant, and gritty than the sex talk.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We're talking about that today. I forgot.
Dude, it's going to be good.
Yeah.
Once again, special thanks to Counseling Care, Marcus and his team over there, and just so many of the resources, research, and things that they've provided to us. Also, just the amazing services that they can offer for
awesome.
all the different things that, everything from
Go to
depression,
Counseling
family.
Care. Go to Counseling Care, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So I want to hear some of the fun things that you've done, entertainment, travels, fun stuff that you've done around town lately.
So I just came back from a trip, Middle East, North Africa. I went to a few countries over there.
That's a big
totally
deal.
a blast.
Nice.
Was in predominantly Arabic-speaking countries, and it was just phenomenal. I traveled with a friend and learned a lot about guys in North Africa and the Middle East, man. It was fun.
Sweet.
Good times. And it was warm there.
Expanding the audience globally,
Yeah,
right?
it was. And it was an opportunity to do that and to kind of grow in my wisdom and knowledge of guys over there. And it was a blast.
That's awesome.
Good time. How about you?
Man.
Anything fun lately?
Gosh, so many kid things. I'm just little kids at home. It's just like...
You went to the zoo, didn't you?
I live in a zoo, man.
Yeah.
I live in a zoo. We had a movie night recently. Paw Patrol is just all the rage. Halloween, just different
You watched
things.
a scary movie?
You
watched Halloween?
We watched a scary, not Halloween. We watched a Halloween version of Paw Patrol within the last little while here. So that's my world right now.
Yeah.
Fairies and outfits and stuff like that. So
I bet you look good in those kind of outfits.
We'll save that for later. Maybe we'll throw a picture of me in my Incredibles costume.
You had an Incredibles costume.
Dude, Walmart bailed me out big time. My daughter had been begging me for weeks and weeks and weeks to be Mr. Incredible. I'm like, I'm not gonna buy an $80, $90 like Incredible.
But you did.
I bought the $19 jammy version, the onesie pajamas version from Walmart.
What did you do? Stuff in a bunch of paper?
No, man, it's just natural. I clearly have the Mr. Incredible physique, right? Which leads us into sex.
I know.
This physique, you would not believe. No, I think this is. I'm excited about this topic. I think obviously
most men are.
Dudes are thinking about it, man.
Yeah, they do think about it.
Thinking about it a lot more than we're talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. I believe so. At least in a serious way.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think we talk about sex, but only in a kind of a joking kind of way when it comes down to locker room talk, to be honest. And we don't talk about it on a serious note. We talk about it everywhere, but with our wives, unfortunately.
Huh. That's the place that it was created for, marriage, is the place we talk about it the least almost.
I think so.
That's crazy.
I think so.
Why do you think that is?
I think guys are afraid to have real honest conversations about sex when it comes down to it.
We that out there early on.
Sure, why not? I mean, it's just we're afraid of certain words for some reason. And I don't even know why we're afraid of those words, but it's seriously, we should be a husband and a wife should be talking about sex frequently. But often we don't ask for what we really want, and our wives are not talking with us about what they really want. And I think we want the same things, but we're not communicating on an intimate level.
That is huge.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I feel like so many of the best conversations I've had with my wife around sex usually come from us having spent a weekend or something with the guys or a weekend with the girls. So much conversation around it there. We come back and we're like, hey, we never really talk about this, but what do you think?
So you've experienced this before, where your wife will go off with all the ladies and talk about what's happening or not happening in their marriage, and guys will go do the same, and kind of have the question, how many nights a week do you guys, have? Exactly. And they kind of one up in everybody else, and it's interesting, isn't it? But they get together. 3 kids, 2 pregnancies, so let's do the math there.
Right. Two times.
Yeah, congratulations. That's awesome, man. And I think that we just never really dig into, I think, a meaningful conversation about sex. And we should, because God created sex, after all. It was his idea. He totally wants us to have it.
Yeah. You look at all of the amazing things that God created. I mean, you just go through the creation story. It's incredible. And then you get to the pinnacle of the creation story, and God creates Eve, and then there's this amazing thing that happens between them. But what is it, and why do we shy away from it? It's, again, this awesome thing that God's created. It's worship in a sense.
Yeah.
Why can't we see it that way, or why do we have trouble approaching it that way?
I think if you go back to the beginning of time, obviously, and yes, Adam, Eve, man, woman, right, created for relationship with somebody, and then Adam and Eve knew each other, right? Isn't that an interesting moment? It's almost as if God was afraid to use the sex word too, right? So that's what happened in that moment. They knew each other. It was a knowing. It was a coming together of two people. And that word in the Hebrew is really interesting. The word to know is a full knowing. It's a physical knowing, yes, but it's also an emotional and an intellectual and a spiritual knowing. It's multi-dimensional in the Hebrew. And I think what makes that really interesting is that men, unfortunately, look at sex sometimes as only a physical transaction with a woman. And yet God created it to be a very multi-dimensional experience. And I think he created it that way, but we have turned it into a transaction. And I know we've turned it into a transaction because men today are very addicted to pornography in a visual way. And so they exchange a look for an act of sex, and they're missing out on all the other beautiful components that were designed to go with that experience. And when we do that, we break this bond that God has created us for, that is more than just, a sexual transaction between us and a computer or us and another person, a woman. And God wants us to experience the fullness of it. And I think that's what Adam and Eve, man and woman, were created for, is this beautiful kind of full knowing, which is why God gave us boundaries and parameters on this whole thing to begin with. Right.
Well, I think that's so good too. I mean, I think the mistake a lot of times that we make is sex is the thing at the end. It's the thing we experience at the end of all this relational work and stuff, but it's a piece of this relationship that God has created to be so rich and to mirror the relationship of Jesus and the church. And, I think that's the danger sometimes, in the trap that we fall into, is that sex is this thing at the end that we're trying to achieve and get, but it's a part of the equation. And I think that's a huge aspect of it.
Yeah, that's exactly why I think sometimes, our wives are looking for sexual intimacy too, but they don't just go about it visually. They go about it very emotionally sometimes. And they really like that emotional connection. And when we don't take time to connect emotionally with them, right, we just look at it transactionally, we miss that emotional connection. Then there's that level of intimacy that they're looking for from it as well. Vice versa, we both do this. And, that emotional connection is a dimension that I think many women are seeking that men don't take time for. So go connect with your wife emotionally and see if you don't get more sex out of it. And not just do it again for the transaction, but just see what connecting with them emotionally will do and what it'll lead to. It's very powerful. But again, we're not even talking about that, right? We're not having these conversations, and we're missing out on all the incredible beauty of the end experience, right? And
so what you're telling me, the number of conversations we have about sex and the frequency of emotional connection equals more sex.
I wouldn't put it in a nice equation.
Metrics, the sabermetrics of the. I'm telling you, I'm a data and analytics guy.
Okay. You now won the process. Sometimes and sometimes not. And sex is so much more than that, right? It's so much more than that. It's not just something that you win on the end. It's an experience that hopefully we're having many of. And unfortunately, I know that some men right now are listening to this podcast who live in sexless marriages. Seriously. And as you get older, you're going to encounter this in your life. Probably not personally, but there are men who are married to women right now because they have drifted apart emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, relationally, that live in sexless marriages and live in a stalemate and don't engage physically with one another and are unsure how to heal those damaged bonds between each other. And it is very, very painful to find a path through that, right? And many of them will either completely give up and go seek it somewhere else, unfortunately. And women will do the same, right? Because they're each looking for the same thing, but don't know how to get there together. And we shouldn't be living in a sexless marriage. We shouldn't. We shouldn't be married to one another and not be having sex because it says something about how we're connecting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's one of the things we were able to take from Marcus and just having some of his insights into this is sex is a gift for your relationship, and it should be opened often.
Yeah.
It's not a one-time gift.
Yeah,
it's a gift that should be opened often. And I think that was a good,
it's
even
a
a
good
good metaphor, a good way to picture it is it's something for your marriage. It's something for, I think that's a really beautiful analogy of how to approach it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not just something that we do transactionally, right? It's something beautiful like you're describing here. It's the sign of true intimacy between two people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So how do we step into that? Whether it's again a sexless marriage or just tension or struggles or a lack of conversation around it, lack of dialogue around it. How do we step into it?
Oh, dude, we need to go home and start talking about sex with our wife, like today. And see, it's actually laughable, isn't it? It's like, so it's interesting, and I hope my kids are not listening to this podcast today because they kind of be embarrassed. But we should, right? Yeah, we should go home today, and we should be talking about what we like and what we don't like, what we want and how often we would like to have it, right? What is going to lead us to greater levels of sexual intimacy. And when we're done having sex, we should talk about what we liked and didn't like. Man, you want to see sexual activity in your marriage go up? Just talk about sex more often. And for some reason, I don't understand it. People in the world love to talk about this stuff, right? Like people in and of the world love to talk about this because this is fun.
You can't go anywhere without hearing, seeing, or in some way interacting with it.
But Christians, for some reason, are not dialoguing about this. Why all the shame around sex? Why isn't sex discussed from the platform at church as something that's beautiful and God-honoring? And why are so many men addicted to pornography? And why are so many women living in emotional loneliness? Like, this needs to end. And it ends by us going home and talking about it. And I think every man listening today should go home and seriously have a conversation with your wife about sex.
So I want to give them their opening line.
Yeah.
Boom.
Hey, there you go.
Vince told me to say.
Yeah, this guy on this podcast told me to talk with you, and he challenged me to do this today. And I want to talk with you about our marriage and sex and just have the conversation and see where it goes. And if you go home and you don't talk with them about that, it says something about you. And then notice why you're unwilling to talk about it. Do some business with that, but get it out on the table, so to speak, right? Get this whole thing out on the table and talk about it and be brave and bold and lean into it. God wants you to talk about it. I mean, there is a whole book of the Bible that is nearly pornographic. I mean, seriously, like we never read this Bible. Why are we not preaching from this? I mean, her breasts are like two fawns? I mean, really? Like, we should be talking about that. We should say, hey, honey, your breasts are like two fawns, or whatever they are, right?
That's the line.
Yeah,
that's
there you go.
Line.
Go use that.
Home to your wife and say, your breasts are like fawns. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it, like right now. And, it's so beautiful that Solomon was willing to talk about it, but he was so descriptive, and we would say, borderline pornographic, but try reading the line. from the Song of Songs to your wife and see how she responds to it. It's pretty cool. I mean, that intimacy in that moment was really, I think for those two, was very beautiful, right? It was very intimate. And the way that they're conversing with one another, we would almost call it hypersexual, wouldn't we? But it's not hypersexual. It's two lovers knowing each other, talking sexually and intimately about each other. Go try that. Your sex might go up, by the way, because you're going to be thinking about it, right? So, I don't know. Give it a try.
Yeah.
Give it a swing.
Well, I think that is such a really insightful topic, is to say, like, I mean, here's Solomon.
Right.
In the confines of his marriage, obviously we know about several of his marriages, but
Right.
the sex life becoming public. I mean, an interesting dynamic for him in this, this writing, this beautiful poetry about his love, and now God's taken that and he's shown it to all of us. Like it's exactly what you're saying. Yeah. It's not this thing that's necessarily supposed to be condensed down into such a small aspect. It is supposed to be discussed, supposed to be talked about, supposed to be celebrated many, many times.
Right, exactly, all the time, right? And I mean, even as we get older in our relationship, we should engage sexually with one another, our spouses, whether how it changes, going to change over time, and it's going to evolve. And I mean, I got to tell you, we should be talking about it. We should be having it. We should be pushing through the hard issues. But we definitely shouldn't be living. We shouldn't be in a marriage where we're not doing these things, because they build up resentment, right, and pain over time. So.
No, I think that's really good. So keeping that conversation alive and active, it's a process of communication as much as it's a physical activity.
Exactly, and there's so many dimensions to it. I mean, there's so many things that we can learn from another person through that experience, and it's designed for the marriage bed, and God wants to keep that holy and alive. He doesn't want us not engaging in it. It is a way that we communicate to one another. It's a way that we know one another.
Oh, that's good. And to realize that knowing doesn't stop. I mean, such a beautiful thing about marriage relationships is that you're discovering something new every day. It was funny. I was actually just talking to my daughter recently, and she was just wrestling with, do mom and dad love me? Do mom and dad like me? And we were able to say, we learn something new about you every day that makes us love you more. And that's the beautiful part about marriage too, is you're in this committed relationship within the context of marriage that you will continually know more and more and more. And to have that as a foundation of a sex life throughout the rest of your life is a really beautiful thing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, just keep building the relationship over time,
Awesome. Well, you've thrown a heavy challenge out there for a lot of guys.
Go about home sex, man.
And tell your wife about the breasts of fawns. Is that how to do it?
It's not even close, but it's fine.
Read
Just
the
go.
Song of Solomon first.
Yeah, that's right.
Quote a verse to your wife and say, "What do you think?"
Yeah, right, exactly.
No, good challenge though. Talk about it.
Yeah.
Break the silence. Lean into it. Step into it. I think that's a challenge for all the guys, all the listeners out there today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks guys for being with us. We love having you here. These are important topics.
BeResolute.org/family for any more resources that you guys might need about this or any other topics. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Man Talk.